No matter how much you stare at it, the sun never seems to change. But that is not the case in the long run. At the cosmic scale, stars have a limited lifespan. From their formation to their eventual death, stars heavily vary in how they evolve throughout their life. And when it comes to stars, size matters. In this video, I'll explore stellar evolution by breaking in stars into categories: large massive stars, medium or sun-like stars, small stars, and a secret fourth brown surprise. I'll examine each from how it lives and how it ultimately dies, and why mass determines everything. Starting off with large stars. Massive stars with more than 8 times the mass of the sun live relatively short but extraordinarily influential lives. Because of their large mass, these stars reach the main sequence quickly and begin nuclear fusion while creating material. On the main sequence, massive stars fuse hydrogen into helium primarily through the CNO cycle, a nuclear fusion process that converts hydrogen into helium using carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen as catalysts, regenerating them in a 6-step cycle to release energy. This makes them extremely luminous, but also causes them to burn through fuel rapidly, limiting their lifespans to only a few million years. Once hydrogen in the core is exhausted, fusion halts and the core contracts under gravity. Hydrogen fusion continues in the surrounding shell, causing the star's outer layers to expand into a supergiant. As core temperatures rise, the star begins fusing progressively heavier elements, helium into carbon and oxygen, followed by carbon, neon, and silicon fusion. These reactions form an onion-like structure of the fusion shells around the core. This sequence ends with the formation of an iron core. Iron fusion does not release energy, so one core exceeds the Chandrasekhar limit. Electron degeneracy pressure fails. The core collapses in a fraction of a second, forcing protons and electrons to combine into neutrons and releasing an immense burst of neutrinos. The collapse triggers a core collapse supernova, ejecting the star's outer layers and synthesizing heavy elements through rapid neutron capture. The remaining core becomes either a neutron store or, if massive enough, a black hole. Though short-lived, massive stars are essential to cosmic evolution, creating and dispersing the heavy elements that make planets and life possible. Now, onto sun-like stars. Medium-sized stars, including our sun, have masses between 0.5 and 8 times the mass of the sun. These stars spend most of their life on the main sequence, where they generate energy by fusing hydrogen into helium through the proton-proton chain. This phase is stable and long-lasting, typically enduring for billions of years. When hydrogen in the core is exhausted, nuclear fusion there ceases, and gravity causes the core to contract. Meanwhile, hydrogen fusing in the surrounding shell increases the star's luminosity and forcing its outer layers to expand. The star enters the red giant phase, growing much larger but cooler at the surface. As the core contracts further, temperatures rise to 100 million Kelvin, igniting helium fusion through triple alpha process, which converts helium into carbon and oxygen. However, sun-like stars do not have enough mass to initiate fusion of the heavier elements. Once helium is depleted, fusion stops entirely in the core. The star then sheds its outer layers in space, forming a planetary nebula, a glowing shell of gas illuminated by a hot central remnant. What remains is a white dwarf, an Earth-sized object supported by electron degeneracy pressure. Over extremely long cosmic timescales, the white dwarf cools and fades, eventually becoming a black dwarf, though the universe is not yet old enough for any to exist. Medium-sized stars die gently compared to massive stars, but they play a critical role in enriching space with carbon, oxygen, and other elements essential for future stars. Now on to smaller sized stars. Small stars, mostly known as red dwarfs, have masses less than half that of the sun. They are the most abundant stars in the universe and characterized by low luminosity, low surface temperature, and extremely long lifespans. Like all stars, red dwarfs form from collapsing regions of molecular clouds and eventually enter the main sequence. However, unlike larger stars, red dwarfs generate energy exclusively through the proton-proton chain at a much slower rate. Because their cores are relatively cool and their fusion rates are low, they consume hydrogen very efficiently. They remain on the main sequence for trillions of years, far longer than the current age of the universe. This is because red dwarfs are fully convective, meaning material circulates throughout the entire star. This allows hydrogen from the outer layers to be transported into the core, enabling red dwarfs to fuse nearly all of their hydrogen over time. When a red dwarf eventually exhausts its hydrogen supply, it does not expand into a red giant. Instead, nuclear fusion gradually ceases, and the star slowly cools and dims. The final remnant is expected to be a helium white dwarf, though none yet exists because the universe is not old enough for red dwarfs to have reached this stage in their life cycle. And finally, my favorite, the brown dwarfs. Brown dwarfs are technically substellar objects with masses between a true star with masses between planets and true stars, typically ranging about 13 to 80 times the mass of Jupiter. They form in much the same way as stars, through the gravitational collapse of gas clouds, but they lack sufficient mass to sustain long-term hydrogen fusion in their cores. Early in their formation, some brown dwarfs can briefly fuse deuterium, a heavy isotope of hydrogen, and the most massive among them may fuse lithium. However, these fusion processes are short-lived and do not provide sustained energy output like true stellar evolution. Because brown dwarfs cannot maintain hydrogen fusion, they by definition never enter the main sequence. Instead, they gradually cool and fade over time, transitioning through spectral crashes from L to T and Y, which are all classes below M, which are so lame that there aren't even any good images of these on Google. Often described as fail stars, brown dwarfs occupy a unique boundary between stars and planets, offering important insights into star formation. When we talk about stellar evolution, a single star's death isn't really the end. The very first stars, called population 3 stars, formed not too long after the Big Bang. They were huge, short-lived, and almost entirely made out of hydrogen and helium. When these stars died in massive explosions, they created the first heavy elements in the universe. Every generation of star sense have inherited material from the ones that came before it. Astronomers call this stellar metallicity, which is just a measure of how many elements heavier than hydrogen and helium a star contains. Stars with higher metallicity are far more likely to form planets, especially rocky ones, like Earth. When massive stars explode as supernova, their shockwaves compress nearby gas clouds, triggering new star formation. Planetary nebulae spread carbon and oxygen into space. Collisions between neutron stars create some of the heaviest elements we know of, including gold and platinum. Looking far into the future, it also hints at the universe's long-term fate. Massive stars will disappear first, followed by sun-like stars. Eventually, only red dwarfs and stellar remnants will remain, slowly cooling. Stars formation will fade, and stellar evolution itself will come to a close. But right now, we live in a rare and active era of the universe, full of change. So don't be too sad. And whether it's the carbon in your cells, the oxygen you breathe, or the iron in your blood, it was all formed within a star. So next time you're outside during the daytime, tell the sun thank you.